Well, we've made it to the end of election season, and we're here to dissect and analyze the results, starting with the Palo Alto City Council. So, Liz Ness, Greg Tanaka, Adrian Fine, Lydia Koo.
Yes, and we had a swing on the City Council from 2 years of residentialist, the slow growth crowd kind of having a slight dominance, kind of 5-4. And it's
4.5 sometimes.
There's a tiny little swing to the other side, although I'd be careful about overplaying the ideological implications of the change.
Yeah.
But suffice to say, we had two slates that aren't really slates, but are slates, and one non-slate elected 3 people, and the other one elected 1. The one with the 3 is slightly more pro-growth. So
Yeah.
in that sense, the council balance tilted a little bit towards growth. But,
Yeah. We'll have to see how those votes roll out. Certainly, there was a lot of discussion just about terminology, about rhetoric during the campaign. Was it really pro-growth, pro-development? Was it pro-housing? That particular, and was the other side truly, quality of life, slow growth?
It's a really tough question, something I've been dealing with for the past year. It's like, if to use a sports analogy, if you have 2 teams on the field, and you're kind of recapping the score, it helps if the teams have names. Otherwise, you're just going through the roster of players.
Right, that takes a while.
So the team with Madison Bumgarner and Buster Posey, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, but whatever name you give them, there's going to be people upset about it. And it's like, ideally, we wouldn't have to label people, and I try not to. The residentialist is not a word I made up.
Sure. Yeah.
But the other camp doesn't really have a label, so we went with moderate just because many of the people on this kind of slate favor some growth, but also oppose, also favor office cap in some cases, and voted against certain projects. So it's kind of hard for me to label them pro-growth per se,
or pro-development, which is even more.
And then, of course, the other side would say, but if you're calling them moderate, are you implying that we're extreme then? It's kind of, and San Francisco and other towns have the same thing. I mean, in San Francisco, the Board of Supervisors is considered progressive wing and moderate wing, and it's just kind of taking for granted those are the labels. But
yeah, it's a difficult minefield. I'm sure we're all glad it's over in this round. I'm kind of wondering if there was any kind of sentiment among the voters for greater change or greater openness toward change based on the fact that we have the 3 from the more Chamber of Commerce pro something or other camp versus the other camp.
Perhaps it's hard for me to get into the mind of the voters, and it's hard to determine how much of an impact this kind of ideological philosophy or even a desire for change plays a role, as opposed to things like negative campaigning and this kind of mayors coming out strongly against certain candidates' actions and those kinds of things. So we could go through the data, and we'll get into that a little bit here and decide which neighborhood supported whom. But the data only takes us so far. The whys of it are something we're going to be unpacking for a while, I think.
How unusual was this campaign in terms of, as you referenced, the Chamber of Commerce's letter, which is a pseudo endorsement that wasn't an endorsement, and all the issues around big money coming in. Was this something you'd seen before in previous campaigns, or was it kind of unusual? The
non-endorsement was kind of new.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Chamber often gets involved in politics, but just not to back particular candidates. So that was very unusual. And I think in 2014 we had a semi-slate form also with the residential candidates, and Lydia Koo barely missed out. So in that sense, just having a team of candidates, it certainly has a lot of precedent in Palo Alto. Things got away from that for a few election seasons before 2014, but I think this is in some ways continuation of what happened 2 years ago.
Yeah, I kind of want to unpack, just since we kind of broadly talk about these semi-slates, let's just talk about the individuals who won and kind of what seemed like their bases of support were. So Liz Ness, incumbent, really well known, 10th election.
Yeah, she's 10 for 10 now.
Yeah. And cruise to victory, really.
That's another thing. I think it's also possible the Liz Ness effect really helped the people who campaigned with her and were on her team. Because if you don't really follow politics, you've still probably heard of Liz Ness just because she's been county supervisor and city council member for so long. And so it's like, and if people are running with her and and they're endorsed by all the Democratic Party, official California Democratic Party people, like Liz Ness's network. So it's possible that Greg Tanaka and Adrian Fine benefited from that, running the same team. So, she did well in every part of the city. There's only like, from what I could count, and I'm still going through the data, about 4 or 5 precincts out of 44 that did not give her the most votes.
Wow.
She finished first almost everywhere. Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
And by a sizable margin in the total result.
Yeah, total result, absolutely. She got like more than 18% of the vote, and the next closest was just 14%. So.
Yeah. Then we had 2 planning commissioners, Greg Tanaka and Adrian Fine. Tanaka kind of had the most fundraising up to a certain point before the big money came in for Keller and Koo. He was really leading there in the money area.
Yeah, he and Liz Ness together, I think they each had about the same. That was in late September before those big donations started coming in. And
Tanaka also had the neighborhood support, though. I mean, he's come up through College Terrace Residents Association, Planning Commission for 8 years?
7 years, but yeah, and this clearly it's reflected in the precinct data, his neighborhood support. I mean, the voters who voted at Stanford and Bowden, that church, he finished first out there. I think it was the only precinct where he took top spot, but he finished second in many others. I think it's the Universalist Lutheran Church. So yeah, he did really well there. So he was pretty up there in the top 2 or 3 almost everywhere. And Adrian Fine was, with some exceptions, was also finished either second or third in many of these places. Though it's possible his numbers were a little bit below Tanaka's, possibly because of all the negative ads. But who knows? Or maybe he wasn't in the scene as long. But they did well in similar places.
Yeah, from a strategic standpoint, the other side really targeted Fine. They thought he was probably the weaker link out of the other 2. That's
what it seems like. But there were also a few precincts where he finished just behind this. We're looking at the area around Castellea in the southern part of downtown. He finished second, got a lot of votes. Lytton Gardens area in downtown north near Everett, he also finished second to Liz Ness out there.
Yeah.
So I mean, he did really well in those areas, but ultimately finished third because Greg Tanaka got a ton of votes elsewhere.
Okay. And Koo, I think one of the surprises was that Keller dropped down to 5th.
It was.
Yeah, among general predictions, he was going to place higher. Anyway, Koo, where did Koo's support come from?
Want to take a guess? Yeah, she did great in Barron Park. Her neighborhood. I mean, she finished first at the precinct that votes at Barron Park School. She finished second at the precinct that votes at Juana Briona School. So it's that's kind of her power base. But in most other precincts, she finished third and fourth in many places too. So. So, I'd be remiss to say that that's where most of her support is, but she just did exceptionally well in those areas and moderately well everywhere else.
It seems like she's going to have some bridges to repair with the rest of the council members. Things did get a little bit negative, especially towards Adrian Fine.
I'll be curious to see where they're sitting once they're seated.
Wait, yes, who decides that? The mayor?
The new mayor, which, well, we can hazard a guess later. That's for the next roundtable.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I'd be curious to see if they're sitting close to each other. But I think her relationship with the council at large is going to be just fine. I mean, many council members endorsed her. She's ideologically aligned with, Eric Filseth, Tom Du Bois. Karen Holman supported her strongly. So I think it'll be fine. It's just, no pun intended. Right. Sorry.
Oftentimes there's lame duck issues that come up in the last couple of months. We've got some slow growthers coming off. Do you anticipate there's any issues that are in front of the council in the next month? I see the affordable housing impact fee is pretty much largely the substantial issue that's coming out, and that doesn't seem controversial at all.
The impact fee?
Yeah.
It's a little controversial.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was held up by the Planning Commission for several months, which frustrated many of the people who wanted to see the increase take effect.
Yeah.
And Adrian Fine and Greg Tanaka, of course, on the Planning Commission, that kind of held it up and kind of argued that more analysis needs to be made, that the fees approved by the Council's Finance Committee need to be vetted further. They kind of didn't go along with the Finance Committee. So, if this is something that gets taken care of now as opposed to a few months from now, I'm not sure if that's going to sway the decision. And there's also the fact that 2 planning commissioners are now council members. And for Tanaka, it was expected, whether he gets elected or not, his term is ending, his replacement has been chosen. For Adrian Fine, obviously there was no planning because it wasn't clear how he's going to do until this week. So now that leaves a vacancy on the Planning Commission, a new vacancy that needs to be filled. And it'll be interesting to see whether it's going to be the current council or the next council that does it, because this was a controversial issue. 2014,
Right.
which in some
Keller.
ways led to Keller running
Yeah.
for council.
What happened
and
in
to
2014?
And to Adrian getting on the planning commission.
Yeah.
Yeah, Arthur Keller was a planning commissioner there, and this was just after the council election, and the outgoing council, those who didn't get reelected participated in a vote to appoint new members that some of the newly elected people thought was kind of a parting shot by the lame ducks because they were kind of more pro-growth,
Yeah.
more amenable to growth. So now that these same critics are on the council, I'd be very curious to see if if they take a page out of that playbook or stick with their comments and let the newly elected decide. It's not clear to me whether it's going to be this council or the next one because it does take some time to recruit people for a vacancy and do the interview process. Fred Balin from Koshier's pointed out in Town Square that the new tentative agenda for the council meetings just came out last night, and it shows that interviews are scheduled for like November 30th. I'm not sure for which commission or board it is, so it's possible they'll take it up, but hard to know because the council hasn't had a chance to discuss it, given that the election just happened.
And they wouldn't just take the same people who had applied prior to the election for the planning commission?
I've never seen that happen before. I mean, the process is you have a vacancy, recruit for it. I know they just had like more than a dozen people apply, and they made 3 appointments. So, but and until the council discusses it, I guess as good as mine.
Yeah. So let's take a look at some of the issues that are coming before the newly constituted council next year. We've still got the TDM programs that are rolling out, and that was a bit of a hot point in the election during the campaign season because some people don't feel like TDMs are really vetted, they're not really proven, and yet the city's kind of banking on them for improvement in traffic conditions. In fact, I think you were just mentioning the other day that since the TDM downtown has rolled out, the number of people driving solo to work has actually increased. It's not
a
fair.
tiny bit, but in their defense, they were pretty open about the fact that they can't meet the council's goal unless they get some funding, and they haven't gotten the funding.
Yeah,
they have
it's
plans. So yeah, we need to hedge that before we discount TDM.
Yeah,
The
of
verdict
course.
is still out.
So TDMs, are rolling out.
Yeah, there's a new development on El Camino and Page Mill, which is tied to the TDM. How you feel about TDM may impact how you feel about the 60 units proposed, 60 small apartments proposed for the busy corner of El Camino and Page Mill.
Yeah.
You have the new RPP programs that are going to come up, and whether employees will be eligible to get permits in the Cal Avenue area, Evergreen Park, and Southgate. That's an issue that might kind of go one way or the other based on who's on the council,
Yeah.
because some people think it should be resident only. Lydia Ku does. I think the current plan is to have employees similar to downtown be eligible in some part, and
Yeah.
people like Adrian Fine support that. So, so the RPP programs are going to be a hot issue. Of course, the comprehensive plan. This council is going to be dealing with the city's long-term vision and possibly approving it. I say that very cautiously. Yeah. So.
We still have 2 more years before the next election, so hopefully we'll be able to see something happen there. 50-foot height limit came up just in discussion during the campaign season. Is there anything that might come up in terms of like a proposal to bust that?
I wouldn't be surprised, though. Though I would think any busting would be for very limited purview, like something like near transit, like right in downtown. Maybe you could stretch it to 55 or 60 if it includes affordable housing. These are the kind of things people are talking about. Or maybe make it more flexible. Something Mayor Pat Byrd proposed just last month, giving flexibility for retailers to have kind of higher ground floor to support retail, and giving them 5-foot exception because that's what's needed to not be cramped in a 4-story, which is the current limit. So I could see 50-foot ceiling being busted for those very limited reasons in very limited locations. I haven't heard anybody during the campaign basically talk about getting rid of it entirely. I know Adrian Fine has mentioned in the past that he thinks it's sort of arbitrary, but he made it clear that despite that, he's not ready to get rid of it because there's so many other opportunities for housing without having to get rid of it at this point.
Yeah. And then the Planning Commission this week was taking a look at some affordable housing zoning, is that, or just housing zoning?
Yeah, actually still have to kind of go over that conversation. But, but yeah, the housing element was approved, and so that the council will consider new policies and zone code changes to deal with, ways to promote things like granny units, accessory dwelling units, small apartments. These are all things that have fairly broad support, both with the outgoing and the new council. So I expect that those issues are going to be front and center. And of course, after the comprehensive plan is adopted, which may or may not happen, that will follow by a zoning code update.
Yes.
So the new council will maybe possibly participate in that as well. So
Yeah.
these are all going
Well,
to be huge issues that are going to
huge
have long-term implications.
continuing growth, development, traffic issues facing the new council as it has this previous council.
Yep.
Yep. Anything else that was surprising from the election locally? I know there was a poll that was kind of cast over the entire election night by the national election.
Yeah, it's kind of weird when you go to an election party and the winning candidates are acting like it's a funeral wake or something like that. But yeah, there was that palette. But I think aside from the national election and its implications, I do think it's another indication. One of the insights is that money doesn't matter all that much in electioneering. It matters to an extent to get like a certain amount. You know how they say like if you have like 70,000 income, probably not in this area, if you get beyond that, your happiness kind of marginally doesn't increase as much. I feel like that's how it is with campaign spending. I mean, maybe you need 30, 40, 50,000 to have a decent campaign and to have Facebook ads all over the place, like Greg Tanaka did. But 90,000, 100,000, we certainly didn't see any kind of marginal utility from that, aside from a bunch of ads, some of which were negative, and which may have swung the election in the other direction.
Yeah, you wonder how that was spent and whether it just came too late as well.
That's possible.
Yeah.
Questions out there.
And also there's been some discussion about campaigns finance limits.
That's true.
Just
Corey
some talk
Wolbeck
about
just
that.
proposed it. At the very last meeting, at the very end, during council comments, he said that he's going to be coming up with a colleague's memo. Right now, I think it's just a colleague memo. I think he's looking for participants. But
Grabbing
yeah, I
his
mean, this is big,
laurels.
and it's clearly tied to the fact that Lydia Koo and Arthur Keller got so much funding. Yeah, it's gonna include like disclosure requirements and limits on how much an individual or organization can contribute. And so, yeah, I expect to see that going forward sometime next year.
Okay. Well, thanks for the wrap up on that, and we will see what happens next year. That's it for this edition. We will be back next week. If you liked what you saw today, you can hit like on this page or subscribe to get notifications of future webcasts. And in addition, you can comment on this topic below, or you can go to paloaltoonline.com/square to participate in Town Square, our online discussion forum. We'll see you next week.